There are two kinds of silence in life. One is the silence of absence, of isolation. The kind that makes the room feel too big, the day too long, and your own thoughts too loud. And then there's the other kind, the silence of presence, of peace, a deeper kind of quiet, the kind that feels like you're finally coming home to yourself. The ancient Stoics lived in both of these silences, sometimes by choice, sometimes by force. But they left us with a question that still matters, maybe even more today than it did back then. How can we be alone without feeling lonely? Welcome to this extended reflection on Stoicism and solitude. In the next 11 minutes, we'll walk through the wisdom of the Stoics, Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and more, asking, what does it mean to be alone? Why do we fear solitude? And how can it become a doorway to strength, peace, and inner clarity? Let's begin. Stoicism teaches us that nothing outside of us is good or bad in itself. Only our judgment makes it so. Solitude is no exception. You can be in solitude and be at peace. You can be surrounded by people and feel utterly alone. To the Stoics, solitude was not a condition to be feared. It was simply a fact of life. And in many ways, it was essential. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." This wasn't a poetic line, it was instruction. He wasn't telling us to romanticize loneliness. He was saying, go inward, learn to dwell there, make it home. The modern world tells us to be busy, to stay connected, to fill every quiet moment with stimulation. But the Stoics would ask, why are you afraid of your own company? Imagine being the ruler of the known world and still needing to remind yourself to take a break from the world. That's what Marcus did. Each night, in solitude, he would retreat to write his thoughts, his doubts, his observations, not for anyone else, just for himself. He wasn't trying to escape responsibility. He was trying to escape distraction. Seneca, too, emphasized the value of solitude, not to run from life, but to reflect on it. In one of his letters, he wrote, "The mind must be given relaxation. It will rise improved and sharper after a good break." And what kind of break did he recommend? Not a vacation, not a party, but a quiet moment, alone, with yourself, a mental pause, a spiritual breath. We live in an age of endless notifications. We're more connected than ever and yet more anxious than ever. Why? Because connection without reflection leads to confusion. We rarely sit still long enough to hear ourselves think. The Stoics believed that if we can't be alone with ourselves, we'll never understand what drives us or what enslaves us. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." And what lies beyond our control? Most of the social world, opinions, status, approval, the endless chase. But what lies within our control? Our attention, our focus, our response. And that is why solitude matters. In solitude, we reclaim our inner freedom. We stop performing. We listen. We return to what's essential. Let's pause for a moment. What do you feel when you are alone? Anxious, empty, restless, or at peace, spacious, aware? The answer might reveal how far we've wandered from ourselves. The Stoics would urge us not to fear solitude, but to train in it, to treat it like a spiritual exercise. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Often, our fear of solitude comes not from the moment itself, but from our thoughts about it. We imagine it means we're unloved, forgotten, irrelevant. But solitude doesn't mean you're invisible. It means you are free to meet yourself without costume or expectation. And in that freedom, you discover something precious. That you are enough, not because you're perfect, but because you are real, whole, human. Epictetus was a slave. He owned nothing. He lived with hardship. And yet he was free, not outwardly, but inwardly. Why? Because he had mastered the art of self-sufficiency. He said, "Seek not the good in external things, seek it in yourselves." And solitude was one way to practice that. When you're alone, you are no longer defined by others' expectations. You are not measured by your reputation, your wealth, your relationships. You are measured only by your virtue, your wisdom, your ability to choose your response. Epictetus believed that suffering comes when we confuse what we can control with what we cannot. Solitude helps clear that confusion. Alone, you realize you cannot control the world, but you can control your mind. And in that simple realization, you become powerful. Seneca was exiled from Rome twice, cut off from society, from politics, from his former life. And yet, in that solitude, he wrote some of the most profound letters in Western philosophy. He didn't curse fate. He studied it. He didn't break down. He wrote down. He used solitude as a tool, not a torment. He said, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve. But when people are not around, withdraw into yourself as far as you can." He wasn't saying to abandon society. He was saying don't depend on it, because only in solitude do we learn whether our peace is real or borrowed. Solitude doesn't hide the self, it reveals it. When the world is silent, what do you hear? Many people avoid solitude not because they dislike being alone, but because they're afraid of meeting their unfiltered self. The Stoics would say, that's exactly why you must face it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Solitude gives you the chance to see what color your soul has become. Are your thoughts bitter, resentful, chaotic, or are they calm, present, disciplined? You won't know until you listen. Solitude is the mirror, it does not lie. And the Stoic way is not to avoid the truth, but to welcome it, no matter how uncomfortable. Because only then can you begin to grow. The Stoics were not abstract philosophers locked in ivory towers. They observed nature, they walked, they watched, they lived simply, and they believed nature itself is our greatest teacher. Seneca said, "We are a part of the whole which the universe is." In solitude you are not disconnected, you are reconnected to nature, to breath, to the deeper rhythms of life. You hear the wind, you notice the sky, you feel your body again, not as an identity but as a vessel. And in that awareness, a deep humility arises. You are not the center of the universe, but you are part of it, and that is enough. The Stoics often practiced voluntary discomfort to strengthen their minds. They would walk barefoot, sleep on the ground, eat simple food, wear coarse clothes. Why? To remind themselves, happiness does not depend on comfort. In solitude, this principle comes alive. You sit with your thoughts, you strip away distraction, you simplify. Seneca advised, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, and ask yourself, is this the condition that I feared?" Solitude can be a form of this exercise, a rehearsal for difficulty, a detox from dependency, a reminder you can survive with less and thrive. In the noise of everyday life, emotions blur together. We feel anxious but don't know why. We lash out but don't understand what we're really angry about. We crave connection but forget how to connect with ourselves. The Stoics believed in clarity, in observation, in presence. Solitude allows emotions to rise without judgment. It lets them surface like sediment in still water. You begin to see this sadness is grief, this restlessness is boredom, this anger is fear in disguise. And once you see it, you can work with it. The Stoics taught us not to suppress emotions, but to examine them. And solitude is the perfect lab. Many people avoid solitude because their inner voice is harsh. It criticizes, replays failures, predicts doom. But Stoicism invites us to train that voice, to turn the critic into a guide, to replace rumination with reflection. Marcus Aurelius practiced this in his journals. Each night he questioned his actions, evaluated his thoughts, and planned to do better tomorrow. Not with shame, with sincerity. Solitude becomes healing not when it's quiet, but when it's kind. It gives you space not to judge yourself, but to know yourself. And from that knowing comes transformation. Here's a paradox. The more you master solitude, the better your relationships become. Why? Because you no longer cling. You no longer use others to fill a void. You approach relationships not from neediness, but from wholeness. You can listen without defensiveness. You can love without control. You can walk away when necessary and stay when it's right. Epictetus said, "Only the educated are free." And emotional education begins in solitude. When you know yourself, you stop demanding others to complete you. You give love as a gift, not as a transaction, and that makes all the difference. Many of history's greatest works were born in solitude. Epictetus taught in a small, quiet room. Marcus wrote in the stillness of night. Seneca composed his letters while exiled from public life. Solitude unlocks creativity, not because it gives us more ideas, but because it removes the noise that blocks them. You begin to hear whispers, a new thought, a deeper insight, a strange beauty you missed before. This isn't magic, it's attention. And Stoicism is nothing if not the art of focused attention. Create something in your solitude, a sentence, a sketch, a new habit, a more honest thought. You'll be surprised what emerges in the quiet. We tend to think solitude is either something we enjoy or don't. But the Stoics would argue solitude is a skill. You don't start by loving it. You start by practicing it. Start small. 5 minutes, no phone, no agenda. Just you and your thoughts. Notice the discomfort. Breathe through the itch to distract yourself. Listen, watch, wait. Eventually something changes. You stop trying to escape the moment, and you begin to sink into it. That's when solitude becomes serenity, not because the world changed, but because you did. As we near the end of this journey, remember, solitude is not a punishment. It's a place, a sacred space, a private temple where your truest self is waiting. The Stoics didn't escape the world. They engaged with it, but they did so from a foundation of inner clarity, and solitude was part of that foundation. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." To be one, you must know yourself. And to know yourself, you must be willing to be alone. So, let this be your invitation. Spend time with yourself, not in judgment, but in wonder. Not to fix, but to listen. Because in that listening, you may hear the voice of something deeper. Call it reason, call it nature, call it God. The Stoics didn't care what you called it. They cared only that you returned to it, and it begins in solitude.